Don't you click that remote. Don't you change anything, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show with Mark Colander. He is a state rep candidate. He's the Republican nominee in the 10th State House District. Look, if you're not in the 10th District, if you are, it's especially interesting, but even if you're not, don't click that remote, because you're going to find out about the really key stuff. You know, are you mad as hell and you're not going to take it anymore? Do you want change? Or do you think things are going right? Look, whatever you think, we want you to watch the show, because if you're concerned about state taxes, if you're interested in how the state is performing, if you're interested in the level of corruption, if you're interested in the governor's race between Pat Quinn and Bruce Rauner, all of that stuff and more is going to be discussed. So don't click that remote, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show with Mark Colander, 10th State House District Republican nominee. Promised, you're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And as promised, we're going to have a really good show, because our guest is the Republican nominee for the 10th State House District. That district includes Bucktown, Wicker Park, Ukrainian Village, West Loop, and East Garfield Park, and a little bit of Austin. Okay, anybody who knows Chicago? It's a diverse area in Chicago. It's about 55% African American, 5% Hispanic, 40% white. Is that about right?
Correct. Perfect.
Okay, and you know the area. You've lived there for 5 years, right?
In Ukrainian Village,
in
right.
Ukrainian Village. So you've
right.
been in the district for 5 years.
Right.
You've lived in Illinois, the greater part of your whole life, right?
Right, right.
Okay.
Born in Austin. I'm one of 5 siblings. At about 5 years old, we all packed up and went to Antioch.
Okay.
Raised up there.
So you know the Chicago metro area,
Oh,
and
yeah.
you know the state of Illinois.
Right.
Well, look,
So-
what happened? Give people a little idea. Why is the 10th State House District has been in the news? Because their state rep was?
Derek Smith.
Why was Derek Smith in the news? Why would people might remember his name recently?
He was just convicted for taking a bribe.
$7,000 bribe.
$7,000
It's really
bribe.
penny ante stuff.
It is.
If you're going to take a bribe, folks, get a big one, right? I mean, that's
don't get
number
it.
one. I mean,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so he was convicted.
Correct.
And after he was convicted, he basically had to resign, because you cannot serve. It's one of the things. You can get indicted. You can get tried.
Right.
But once you get convicted, you can't serve from prison, right?
That's right. Prison's not a good place to serve from.
All right, so you ran in the Republican primary. You are the Republican nominee. The
Right.
Democratic opponent in this case is?
Pamela Reeves Harris.
Okay, what's wrong with Pamela Reeves Harris? She sounds like a nice person,
She does?
doesn't she? I mean, it's nice.
Well, the name is nice. Yeah, I don't know her that well. We've bumped heads a couple
What's the
times.
biggest, let's get right to it. What's the biggest substantive issue on which you and Pamela differ? Do you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
The size of government. She wants to keep it exactly the same and grow it more. She wants to tax people more. I want to tax people less. She's waist deep in Chicago politics, and I'm not.
But if somebody's watching this, whether they're in the 10th, whether they're in a state house district outside in Chicago, what do you think the common Jane or Joe, what are they most interested in finding out about state government? Is it taxes? Is it education? Is it pension reform? Is it something else?
God, I think the main thing people are looking at is just the way the whole state is being managed. And the biggest thing that keeps coming up specifically is jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs.
Yeah, you mean the unemployment rate in Illinois tends to be higher than elsewhere in the country. It's
Correct.
come down, but it's
It
come
has.
down in the country.
Correct.
So what are we like, almost last in our relative unemployment rate relative to other states?
Well, in the Midwest, we're the worst.
Okay, worse.
I mean, and this is the reason why I ran. A great city like Chicago in a great state, right in the middle of the best country on the planet, is stagnant. And there's no good reason for it. But the reason is because of bad government. It has nothing to do with me
Bad
and you.
government, what do you mean?
We're mired in a way of government that says that the state knows everything, that when the state needs more money, they're just going to take it from us. And
Did they raise taxes 4 years ago? The state of Illinois raised taxes?
they did, as has the city. Most
What
recently,
was
in
the tax rate before they raised it for the income tax?
went
in
from
Illinois?
3% to 5%.
It was 3%, so about a
Correct.
66% increase.
Exactly.
And they said, if you get that money, we can pay down our bills. Did the bills get paid down?
Some bills have gotten paid down, actually.
But there's
along
still a
that
lot left? Well, there's
Oh,
like
there's
$5 billion
billions.
of unpaid bills.
Oh, no, it's in billions.
And so they got about, what, 28 or $30 billion more over the last 4 years. Where did it all go?
Well, we're a horribly run government. No
Did it
one's
go-
really
a
sure
lot of it
where it
went to
went.
pensions, right? They
lot of went to
started making
pensions.
their pension payments.
Started making some of them. We're
Yeah.
still struggling to make that, though.
So they would say, well, look, we did what we had to do. We had to pay our pensions, we had to raise taxes. What would you say to that point of view? Is that the view that Pamela Reeves Harris would say, you think?
I've read in some of her interviews, she thinks the pension system is just fine. She doesn't plan to do anything with
The
it.
tax increase is just fine.
Tax increase is fine. In fact, in a quote from her in a Tribune article, she said, I think it's time the businesses pay even more taxes.
So they might, okay, but before they raise taxes, tell the people what's going to happen. If nothing gets done by the legislature in the remainder of this year, we're taping this on September
21st.
September 21st, 2014. The election is November 4th.
Right.
By the end of the year, that tax increase that was passed 4 years ago, what's supposed to happen to it statutorily?
Well, they're trying to make it permanent.
But what
I'm totally
if nothing
against it.
happens? If the state legislature does nothing, it sunsets. Explain to people what that means.
Well, what it means is everyone who's going to be paying this higher tax simply has less money.
No, but doesn't something happen statutorily? Right now, it's 5%.
Correct.
Doesn't it sunset and go down to 3.75 unless the
If
legislature?
they do nothing, correct.
So if nothing happens, folks, you're going to get a tax decrease, not quite back to the old rate, but close. It was 3%. If nothing happens, the law says, come January 2015, your individual income tax in Illinois will go from 5% to 3.75. But a lot of people are betting something will happen, that the
They're fighting right
Democrats
now
are
to
in the
keep it up.
majority.
Yeah.
Pat Quinn says he doesn't support that decrease. He wants that increase to stay, even though it's supposed to be temporary. So the Democrats have all but said if they have their way, they're going to raise taxes.
Absolutely.
So
We haven't talked about property taxes yet either, by
and
the
you
way.
forget for the moment just income tax, okay? And Pamela Reeves Harris would be okay with that, you're saying. That
Correct.
is, reverse the law, say that the taxes won't go down to 3.75, but go back to 5.
Yeah, she's in
She's
agreement.
okay. Now, we should say, we'd like to have Pamela Reeves Harris here. We've got a standing invitation. Come right on. We've had your opponent on. Want to have you on. So come on, and, we don't want to speculate about your views. You come on and speak for yourself, okay? Come on, Public Affairs. We're fair and balanced. Give everybody a chance. We're doing our best effort here to represent your views, because you're not here, relative to your opponent. Right?
Exactly. Right.
Okay, so
Right.
you got the tax issue.
Right.
And you're saying taxes will go back to 5%, and you think the Democrats might want to raise them even higher.
Well, possibly, yeah. I mean, whether it's income tax or property tax or tax on your
But
TV.
property tax is controlled by the sort of the counties, and isn't it, or the local school, the taxing districts. So people should know, if you're in the state of Illinois, there are a bunch of taxing districts, including your local school board. Whether you're in Winnetka, whether you're in Wilmette, whether you're in Naperville, that's controlled locally. And the biggest component of your property taxes are your school taxes, right?
Correct.
So as a state rep, there's not a lot you can do about property taxes, or is there?
Well, I mean, the whole state is completely backwards on how it spends money. Every district, every part of the city and state is desperate for money. So they're going to look for all kinds of ways to raise money.
But one
Right.
thing you could do, now that I think about it, possibly on the education level, because folks, we don't have a lot of competition here. We don't really in terms of education. We have in the Chicago public schools, which, is like 400,000 students. So that's about 25% of the entire population of public school students across the state of Illinois. Maybe there are 2 million students, that's 20%. And if you don't like your school and you live in Chicago, you don't like your public school, and you're relatively wealthy, say your name was somebody like Reverend Jackson, and you got a son named Jesse Jackson, roll it back 30 years ago. They were living in Washington, D.C. They didn't like the schools. You didn't know this, but former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., he went to one of the most elite private schools you could go to, St. Albans School in Washington, D.C. The Obamas, they live in D.C. now, but they don't send their kids to the Washington, D.C. public schools. No, they opt out for the private Sidwell Friend School. It's about $30,000 per student. And when Barack Obama was on this show, my good friend Barack was on this show in 2000 to 2004, and he was living in Hyde Park, he sent his kids to the University of Chicago Lab School, a private school, again, $20,000 to $30,000 per kid. Now, I'm not knocking that because he had choice. Now, the only question is, should there be choice for lower income people and also rich people in Chicago? They can move. They can move to Winnetka, they can move to Naperville, and then they send their kids to a public school. They pay high property taxes, that finances it. But the only people who don't get to choose to exercise choice, who would those people?
Low
Your
income.
people in your district, like in Bucktown, can they just say, "Oh, I'd like to take my $15,000"? That's what they spend per kid per year in CPS. They could take their $15,000 and go to the parochial school or a private non-sectarian school. They can do that, right?
That is not correct.
They can't.
They can't.
Doesn't that seem terribly unfair?
It does. I mean, you're talking to a guy that, my father was an inner city Chicago school teacher for almost 30 years, right? I can remember being a kid in 7th grade grading these poor kids' papers who couldn't spell cat. And half a century of failure is producing what we see now.
Well, Robin Staines.
These kids should have a choice.
Robin Staines is the executive director of Advanced Illinois, hardly a right-wing organization. It's a well-known education reform organization. On this show, explained to me that roughly 20% of the black 4th grade kids in CPS read at grade level. 80% don't. So we succeed, we get a 20% success rate. And Hispanics do a little better, but not much better.
Gotcha.
And so you would think, like Pamela Reeves Harris, when we have her on, she'll tell me, well, is she African American?
She is.
So even more, why she should care more about those black kids.
Right.
You should care whether you're white or black, but might be a little bit more sensitive. So you think she would say, oh, Jeff, I'm so in favor of school vouchers and charter schools because I think those black kids have a right to leave their failing school and go to the school of their choice. Is that what Pamela's going to tell me?
I'm not sure where she stands on that.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% certain.
Pamela,
but I'll
you
tell
come
you.
on and tell me because I don't know. I might be surprised to hear, and I hope I am, that you favor school vouchers and charter schools and you want people to have choice. But the Democratic Party, as we've said with Reverend Jackson, with, Speaker Mike Madigan, Lisa Madigan went to a private school. The Obamas send their kids to a private school. And none of these people, as far as I know, favor complete school choice.
Right.
So none of the Democrats. So she's a Democrat. I'm sort of maybe
It's a good
stereotyping
guess
her.
that she's not for it. But I haven't publicly heard it. I haven't read it.
Pamela, just come on and surprise me, and I'd like to be surprised and corrected.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay. So that's
I don't
something
wanna-
you could do. As a state rep, you could make it easier for CPS and other schools to have more charter schools, because right now the state sets a limit on how many
it's
charter
max.
schools.
Correct.
So they don't make it easier, they make it harder.
That's right.
You certainly can't have school vouchers. They could do something to facilitate that.
Look, there needs to be competition. I've seen it firsthand. These schools are failing for half a century.
Believer in competition. You're out there competing every day.
Correct.
You're in private sector business, right? In telecommunications.
Right.
There ain't nothing more competitive than telecommunications.
That's right.
But you believe in that.
Absolutely.
If you do well, you've got a company and you succeed. If you don't, you fail. You're okay with that.
I'm okay with competition, yes.
Now, and so we should have the same with CPS. If CPS public schools can do better than their competitors, charter schools are public schools. They're just not traditional neighborhood schools.
Right.
Voucher schools wouldn't be. If they can compete and do better than the parochial schools, than the private schools, but let's be fair. We need fair. Democrats always say we need fair trade, fair competition. And fair would be the parents are empowered, they get the money, and the money follows the kid, right? So if the kid goes to parochial school, they don't have to try to see if they can provide a good education at $6,000, which is about what they do now. They get the full thing, $15,000. That would be fair competition.
Right. I mean, I don't see how anybody's against it because it's a choice. If you want to stay in the public school, you can stay.
Right.
But why not give these parents a choice to send their kid to a better school?
Okay, so you're running on that. Because the people in Bucktown, the people in Wicker Park, in Ukrainian Village, in the West Loop, Garfield, East Garfield Park, and Austin, Those are your folks.
Correct.
You want to represent them.
Absolutely.
And you think they might, you're talking to them. You ever
Right.
talk to them about school choice? You ever say,
I
hey,
have.
would you like to take your kid out of the public school? It's not doing so well. Send your kid to a school of your choice. They want to do that?
They love the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not 100% across the board, but once you explain it
The
in
great majority, they want to be empowered.
Absolutely.
Every parent wants the best for their child.
Absolutely.
And if they know their child's not learning how to read.
Got to move them.
Okay. So we've covered education, we've covered taxes.
Well, I want to say one thing about taxes, though,
Okay.
that we didn't cover,
Yeah.
as far as the income tax goes. What the current administration doesn't understand, what obviously Pamela Reeves Harris doesn't understand, is that we are already overtaxed, overregulated, and the people I'm talking to are completely over it.
When you say we, who's the we?
The people
Individuals,
working,
employers,
the employers,
the whole
employees,
schmear?
the whole across the board.
Really? Because there are people like Ralph Morturi at the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. He says we don't tax enough. He says we need to tax more. He says we're not doing well as a state because employers want quality education, and he says we're not investing in education. So he says you need to raise your taxes, you need to have more revenue, then you'll get better education, and you'll get more employers. Ralph, did I get it right? That's what Ralph Morturi says. If you want to find out, see, I even put in a plug for Ralph. CTBA Online. You want to find out more about the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability? Go to CTBA Online. And Ralph, come on the show. And if I got it wrong, you explain. We're tough but fair to everybody, right?
Absolutely.
So Ralph says you should have more taxes. Taxes should go down.
I have a suggestion
You disagree
for him.
with Ralph?
I wholeheartedly reject that idea. If he wants to pay more taxes, break out his checkbook, send in more taxes. The rest of us need a break. I've heard that from employees, especially from employers. People, families, and people are hurting.
So employers may leave the state, and then they take
They
the
are
jobs
leaving the
with
state.
them.
Employees
and
are
so the employers are hurt as well as the employers. Everybody's
Correct.
hurt.
Absolutely.
Got to get control of spending and taxes.
Got to get control of the spending and taxes. That's right.
What about Bruce Rauner? Now, he's running for governor. He's a Republican. You're a
Correct.
Republican.
Right.
You're most likely supporting Bruce.
I support him in the primary, too. And let me tell you the first reason why. He was the first candidate running in the primary that I heard say that this state is in a death spiral. And he's exactly right.
In a what? Death or death?
Death spiral.
Death spiral. And
Yeah.
What is causing it to spiral? I assume you mean down.
Spiraling down, out of
And
control, correct.
what do you think Bruce would say is causing the state to spiral down?
Oh, we're hemorrhaging cash. Where people are leaving the state. We're losing one resident every 10 minutes. There's no reason why we're in the predicament
Because
we're
they're
in.
leaving in part because taxes are high and
Taxes
getting higher.
are way too high, correct.
Spending is getting out of hand.
Spending's out of control. There's no accountability.
And we have these very high pensions that we're paying, and
Right.
we didn't always contribute money, so they're underfunded by $100 billion. So people are
Figure I've heard
slipping
it's
out.
200, but 100,
Some would say
200.
$200 billion.
Yeah.
So what do you think needs to be done about pensions? I mean, that's something the state has voted on. There was pension reform. It passed the state legislature.
It did.
Give Pat Quinn credit. Pat Quinn supported it. He supported pension reform, didn't he?
He did.
You supported pension reform?
I support pension reform, correct.
What is pension reform? What did the pension reform do that passed the legislature that you supported?
Well, it asked. Well, first of all, it got blocked by the Illinois
Keep it
Supreme
quick.
Court.
What did it do? You supported it, right?
Well, I would have been in support of it. Obviously, I'm
You
not a
would have
candidate.
been.
yeah.
Okay, right.
It's a step, at least a step
Right
in the
now,
right
you're
direction.
saying if you had been there, you would have voted.
It's a
yes.
step in the right direction,
What
but
did
it didn't
do?
go
Very
nearly
simply,
far.
Very simply, what did it do? Keep it
It
simple.
required some people to pay more, and it also attempted to raise the retirement age by a couple of years.
So employees made a greater contribution to
Some
their
did,
pensions.
yeah.
Some of the funds, some of the public
Correct.
sector unions, and it raised their retirement age. They couldn't retire quite as early, so that would
Exactly.
make the pension funds a little more solvent.
Exactly.
And did it also adjust? The cost of living adjustment was not going to go up as fast as it had been previously, right?
Right. I think it was tied to the
Tied
rate
to more
of inflation.
Before, it just would go up 3% a year no matter what.
No matter what,
Even if
by
you
law.
had 0% inflation,
Yeah.
it was kind of a misnomer to call it a cost of living adjustment.
Yeah, yeah.
So that helped, you're saying, a little bit, but it didn't go as far
Not
as you
even
would have
close.
liked.
Not
You would
even
have liked,
close.
what else would you have done?
I mean, the whole system is broken. Remember, basically, think of me as being your investment advisor. I'm taking money out of your paycheck for 30 years, like they did with my father and my grandfather, who was a Chicago policeman, and simply not invest it. Bernie Madoff did that, and he's currently serving 150 years.
Or maybe they overestimated what the rate of return would be, and as rates of return have come down in the market, they haven't adjusted, so they need more flow coming in to get this kind of benefits they've promised.
No.
No?
They just didn't spend the money. They just didn't invest your money.
They didn't invest it properly, is what
They
you're
didn't even
saying.
come close.
So what would you do now as a reform? Is there anything major you would do going forward to reform?
There's so many
pensions?
things we could be doing
Give
that
me
we're
the
not
most
doing.
important one, just in like a minute, so we got to go on.
Definitely raise the retirement age.
We talked about that. But in addition to raising the retirement age, in addition to raising the employee contribution, in addition to freezing or lowering the cost of living adjustment, is there anything
Tying
else?
it to inflation.
Anything
Those are
else?
huge. The other thing I would do is eventually move this to a 401k program.
A defined contribution.
Correct.
Is
Get the
that-
government out of it.
Right now, it's a defined what? How is it? It's not defined contribution. It's called defined benefit. Is that right?
I'm not sure which is the right term,
Yeah.
but
So in other words, people get a certain benefit no matter what, even if the investment returns are low or they get less. Under a defined contribution plan, then the state puts in a certain amount of money, and then you get to invest, like you invest your 401k.
right.
You favor that?
Yes.
Okay. Pamela Reeves Harris, does she favor all the education reform that got passed, do you think?
The education reform or
Excuse me, the pension reform?
What I read is she thinks the pensions is fine.
So they shouldn't have done the pension reform
She
legislation.
doesn't want to touch it.
She doesn't want to go toward defined contribution. She thinks
She
it's
does
fine.
not. She
Even
thinks
though
it's
there's
fine.
$200 billion.
She thinks it's exaggerated.
Even though it's $200 billion in underfunding, she thinks
A
it's
couple $100 billion
exaggerated?
short, yeah.
Nothing to worry about.
Nothing to worry about.
Pamela, if we got that wrong, you come on and straighten us out, straighten me out, okay? Right? Because we're fair and square.
We're fair and square.
Crime. Crime is a big issue in your area?
In parts of it, yes.
Parts of it, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, State Rep Mitchell was on here, State Rep Christian Mitchell, and he said he's doing a study. He's going to
Study.
find out if we're throwing the book at straw purchasers. Is that enough? I mean, I said
No.
like people are dying. We'd have like 80 shootings in Chicago in a weekend, maybe 10 people killed. I said people are dying, and he said we're doing a study, Jeff.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you my study.
If you go down to Springfield, you're going to support doing a study?
No, I don't need a
What-
study.
what
Let
do
me
you-
tell you
what
the
do you-
study
what are
I
you gonna
did.
do? Okay.
Just yesterday, I went to Moon Sandwich Shop on Western. This is primarily a black diner. It's been there for 80 years. And I asked them, why is there so much crime? And they'll tell you in a heartbeat, not enough police. And the people they do catch aren't serving enough time. You got to put more people.
Stiffer sentences.
Absolutely.
Would they favor mandatory sentences?
That's a little touchier issue in that part of the
really?
community. It
Okay.
is.
Well, if
But
they favor tougher sentences, why are they opposed to mandatory sentences? Aren't they
you
usually
can probably
tougher
talk them
sentences?
through,
Yeah.
what's mandatory, what's not, make
But
sure.
they definitely want tougher sentences.
Absolutely.
So Christian, they've done their study in your neck of the woods, and they've
They cut-
decided they don't need to study anymore.
Yeah.
They now need longer sentences.
My study cost me $9.40. I sat at the diner, I ordered my sandwich, and I heard exactly what's wrong.
Plus, if we give people choice in education, and they can actually read at grade level, they improve their education due to competition, well, then they're less apt to join a gang. And if they don't join a gang, they're less apt to get involved in shooting. There's less crime. So improving the quality of education through choice and competition is a way, in the long run, of reducing violence. Right?
Absolutely.
They would probably favor that. because they want
Absolutely.
less
They'll
violence.
tell you that. When you sit down and talk with them, in that community, that's exactly what they say. So much of it is back tied to jobs.
So we
And-
get to jobs now. People are talking about minimum wages. They say, some people say, like Pat Quinn says, that's what we need. Barack Obama, we need a federal minimum wage, he says, of $10. I know Pat and Rahm Emanuel are talking $13, $15.
Yeah.
Isn't that good? Like, you can't be opposed to that, because if you've got a law in Illinois, but right now it says people get $8.25 an hour,
Right.
higher than the federal minimum wage, $7.25, and you push it up to 10 or 15, you're helping people because they get a higher wage.
Yeah.
And your people in Bucktown, your people in Austin, your constituents in Wicker Park, Ukrainian Village, they'd say, okay, go ahead, support that. I need that higher wage, right? Is that what they're telling you?
Some might say that, but
Yeah.
the vast majority don't. It's a job
They
killer.
don't? They
No.
think it's, why would it kill jobs? Just because you're paying a higher wage?
Yes.
Look,
Classic
employers,
example.
Employers
Classic-
have a lot of money. They can just raise their
Oh, yeah.
raise the price on their products.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a business owner. Again, back to Moon Sandwich Shop.
Okay.
I asked him that exact question. can you afford to pay a higher minimum wage?
Yeah.
Immediately, he's been running this place for 30-something years. Immediately comes back, it's not a matter of I can afford it, it's a matter of my patrons can afford it.
Because the prices would be higher, but
Way
he doesn't
higher.
control the prices, so his prices may not go up. And in that case, he's got to fire people, right?
He's got to lay people off.
Because he doesn't have the money to pay them.
He doesn't have enough money to pay him. That's
But
right.
Christian Mitchell, he's came on here and he said, WBEZ cited to studies, like WBEZ, that's the local public radio station.
Correct.
So he said they cited to studies that show when you have higher minimum wages, you put more money in people's pockets, and then you generate more demand, and the economy gets better.
Right.
So he said, well, why stop at $15 an hour? Why stop at $30? Why don't we pay him $100 an hour?
That's right.
Because if it's just putting more money in,
Right.
but the more money in their pocket comes from somebody else's, from like the guy who owns that restaurant, right? What's the name of that restaurant?
Moons.
Moons.
Moon Sandwich Shop.
So the owner takes money. He's got less to spend. So somebody has less to spend, somebody has more. Doesn't it net out?
You know, I saw that same report with WBEZ notes studies. There's just as many studies that say it doesn't help the people at the lower end.
Yes, Christian.
It reduces the number of jobs out there.
No, University of Chicago, more Nobel Prize winners in economics than any other university across the world. And Christian would know these people because he has a degree from the University of Chicago. I say, can you name one economist at the University of Chicago who supports your view? Well, Jeff, not one.
Not one.
Not one.
Well, you don't even
Okay,
need
so
to
you get
study
more.
economics.
Yeah, so you get
know-
more. You just know that when you raise the price of something, you get less of it.
Yeah.
If you raise the price of labor, there's going to be less demand for it. So people, how are you better off being unemployed at $12 an hour as opposed to employed at $8 an hour?
Exactly.
Really?
We need more people employed, not less.
All
And
right. So we only got about a minute left. What have we not covered that you want to tell your viewers and your constituents and everybody across the state of Illinois?
that the way out of our problems is not through taxation. It's through lowering taxes, lowering regulations, creating an environment in which businesses can excel here. They can thrive here. They can hire here. That is not happening now because of the policies we're currently on. We need to get off this
And
track.
people have a choice because you have this view, and it sounds like Pamela Reeves Harris has a different view.
Completely opposite, right?
So we have, a number of years ago, we said a choice, not an echo, right? You're not a Me Too Democrat, right?
Not at all.
You're a different kind of Republican.
Right.
She's a Democrat.
She is.
People have a choice.
Clear choice.
We don't support anybody. Pamela, come on. You give your argument. We've heard what Mark Colander has to say. He's the Republican nominee for the State House seat to replace, what's that guy, Derek Smith,
Derek
who was
Smith.
indicted and then convicted and could be doing
Correct.
time for a bribe. So who's the best? Who's the best in the 10th State House District? Who really represents your viewers? Who represents the constituents in the 10th? In Bucktown, in Wicker Park, in Austin, in East Garfield Park, in Ukrainian Village, in West Loop. But think more broadly, folks. Who's the best across the state of Illinois? Think about running for governor. Our candidates, Pat Quinn, Bruce Rauner. I mean, those are the choices people have, right?
Yeah, I mean, the choice is real simple. Have you had enough? Have you had enough? Have you seen enough? Are you tired of the same old, same old? This is why I decided to run. A great city and a great state is being run like a third world dictatorship. And we've had enough.
And one thing you can never get enough of, absolutely never get enough of, public affairs. So you folks come back next week and every week to watch Public Affairs.